Welcome to season 5 of What, Why, God. And in this season, we're asking the question, why not God? There is a shift happening in our world today where people are actually wanting to go back to church and wanting to learn more about what it means to be a Christian. And basically, they're looking for, why am I here? That's the question they're asking. Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? And the simple truth of the gospel, I think, is beginning to resonate with people. And so we're asking, how can we as a church lean into this wonderful thing that's happening right now? So today I have with me Matt Davis. He is a charter member of First Colony. He was also, you said, the first youth minister. Is that right?
Unpaid youth minister.
Well, he and his wife, Jerry, have been coming here for a long time. I'm just going to say that. Married for, you said, 41 years.
41, just celebrated.
That's awesome. And so when I sent him the questions that I had thought would be really good, things that are really people are asking. And the big question these days is, what has happened to this world? It has gone crazy. And so a lot of people are asking, how can God fix what's wrong? And it's a very practical question. How can God fix that? So Matt, before we start, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you chose that question in particular.
Okay, so I started my company 42 years ago. Came right out of college, started, have had the honor and pleasure to work with some of the wealthiest families in the world. And so I'm in a position where I can actually have an influence on people. And so part of my DNA, which will come out here in our discussion, I'm going to share with you guys. But I chose this question because I'm coming at from a different standpoint. I believe that today in America, it's going to be hard to find anyone that says, I have never heard of Jesus. Tell me about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so if we're in a position where people know, we have to be able to relate to them differently. And so I believe in America, one of the greatest mission fields is in our workforce area. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to share with you is how I answer that question, but how I'm relating to people. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you that I don't get this right often. so thankfully, God's grace is there to cover us. But I want to hopefully share with you some things that I've used that have worked really well to allow people to ask you the question, to give you that freedom, to give you that space to be able to answer it.
Right. So you mentioned when you were talking, you just said that we have a lot of access to the Bible. And what we're seeing is the world is not new, nothing new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says, right? But we as Christians really need to understand, well, where we fit in the world. And tell me more about that, because you mentioned something about you got to know where you fit in the world, how people and how you can use that to get people to a better place.
Yeah. So if you look at the world from space, it's just a little bitty object. When you look at where I fit in this world, it is tiny. Yeah. When you look at where we fit in the world, in the universe, it is minuscule. But there's a huge God.
Yeah.
The one who created all this, who made it happen. I think he's big enough to give us what we need to answer people's deepest seated needs, their wants, their desires, and also the questions they have. And so when I think back to when I really became what I consider a Christian, not necessarily when I was baptized, but when I really started to think about what it means to be a servant of God, to be a disciple of Christ, there is a purpose. And I believe my purpose is that whenever I meet someone, I'm sitting in front of you right now. Mm-hmm. This just didn't happen. Right. This is a divine appointment. Mm. And God puts people in front of you for a purpose to serve you and for you to serve them. And so I believe at some point in time, on Judgment Day, there'll be an accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I put these people in front of
In
you.
your
What
path.
did you do with
Mhm.
that opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is, in fact, what I believe, then I believe it's my job as a Christian to help that person sitting in front of me get to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a philosophical feeling I have. And being able to get that person to a point where they are open to share with you takes thought,
Yeah.
takes relationship, and also maybe questions that you ask and things that you do that disarm people, that allow them to say, what's different about that guy or that girl?
Yeah. And didn't you say that you and your partner have the same basic philosophy?
So
when you started your business.
when we met at Texas A&M, we were friends. Then we went into the same business and were competing, and thought we ought to not compete. Let's work together.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was 40 plus years ago. But as we got to know each other better, we found that we actually had the same DNA levels, that we believed that anyone that we met with, there was a divine appointment that went beyond what our job was.
Right.
But it was to know that person, to help them do whatever it was that they need to do to get to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our job, what I do, I don't always get to see someone converted.
Yeah.
But I can help them get to where they are working better with their family. They're relating better with their children, with their spouses, whatever that might look like. And I know we're going to jump around here. And so
no, go ahead. You go.
I do a lot of reading, and several years ago I read this book. It really was fascinating to me. It's called Finding God in Sin City. And what this pastor, who had been very successful, had grown his church and decided he wanted to go someplace where it was a challenge.
Right.
And so he chose Las Vegas. And he had no money, he had no support, and he couldn't get anything. The only place he could find to rent was a small little area in a strip joint that was next to a XXX rated bookstore and nightclub. And what was fascinating about that is that place, XXX rated, had these huge spotlights that went back and forth, that at night.
Oh, right. Here we are.
Highlighted where they were.
Yeah.
And he said, God used that and those spotlights to lead people not only to there, but they saw something and they were still needing something, and they found it here.
At the church instead. Yeah.
And his philosophy was, do we accept people who we want them to change before they come in? Or do we invite them to come in and allow the Spirit to change them while they're here? And so that was, to me, was really, really impactful. And I thought about, okay, if I'm walking through a grocery store and I'm buying a card or something and I walk out, do I just pay my money, or do I spend some time talking to the person that's there? Do I try to relate to that person? And sometimes people are having a tough day.
Yeah.
I recall back in the summertime, I was playing golf at my club up in Colorado, and we had a group of guys, and I went at the turn. I went to grab a Gatorade and a candy bar, which is my downfall. And this girl was working at the bar, and she was just having a bad day. And so I tried to talk to her and couldn't get her to say anything. And finally, I said something that kind of made her laugh. And then she just got really, really mad. And she kind of threw things around. I said, man, I'm sorry you're having a tough day. I go, what's up?
What's going on?
And she said, I said, so this place is gorgeous. I mean, we're in the mountains. There's this beautiful lake. And I go, how can you have a bad day here today? And then she just got really mad. She goes, I have to work at this terrible job. I'm in this terrible location. I'm going to school. I'm in debt. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I go, but this is a beautiful place. And I go,
Yeah.
so what are you doing in school?
Yeah.
And she goes on to tell me that she's trying to become a nurse.
Okay.
And I said, well, my daughter, and I told her about my daughter and what she does. And she goes, well, you're rich. And, she never, and I go, well, no, I want you to know my daughter worked retail. I said, you're working at the best possible place you could work, because you know what? You're going to meet people of all kinds.
Yep.
When you're working as a nurse, you're going to have people that are hurting, that don't feel good. You're going to learn to ask questions. You're going to learn. And this girl went from a total just spewing and spitting bad stuff to her demeanor changed. I watched her over the course of summer. She would learn what the customers wanted when they walked in. She would hand them what they wanted. She knew their names. And she told me later, she had a little tear in her eyes. She said, why did you ask me? And I told her about my DNA.
Right.
And she goes, well, what's that about? So we ended up having this question, a conversation about faith that came out of
You simply
a bad,
asking.
bad spot that allowed her to think through, wow, I can see now that what he was saying was good for my career, but it also makes me a happier person.
Yeah.
And that's not me, that's God.
Yeah. That is really good. No, I mean, because you kind of have to allow yourself to lead people to Christ just by who you are. And it's not, I think a lot of people get afraid of, the world is crazy. I think because we're not kind to each other anymore. We're angry a lot. And if you can be that kind person, if you can be that person that asks the good question, because sometimes a question means that you care. Most of the time it does, right? If it's a question about yourself, that's different. Like, what do you think about me? But if you're asking somebody, people like to talk about themselves. They want to feel seen and heard. And so when you do that, and then can give her a little bit of advice on top of it, even better. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I would say to our listeners and viewers that asking questions is not a hard thing.
Yeah.
I also would say that with the right mindset and spirit, we know that God will give us everything we need to communicate what he intends for to be communicated. Yeah. So it really takes the burden off of me. I just need to do what God wants me to do.
Yeah.
Again, think back to the world, the universe, and where you are. You're a little bitty tiny bit, but there's this huge God who is there to help it all happen in his time frame.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about that, how some people will ask that question and be kind of angry about it and know you're a Christian perhaps and are looking to get kind of a gotcha. What's so wrong? And how can God fix all of this? Because God created this mess, because he created us, right? And so how would you respond to somebody who's a little angry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wouldn't do it on Facebook.
Yeah,
or on social media.
Exactly.
Social media. I would like it to be in person or on a phone call. But I would always try to, when you're faced with a question that there is a tense, there is an edge to it, the best thing you can do is ask another question. Mm-hmm. And also the setting counts. And so that's why I mentioned the field force. The workforce is one of God's greatest mission fields in America. Obviously, when you're in a work environment, not all the time, but most of the time there's decorum.
Right.
And so as you get to know people, one of the things I do, I own the business, and with our employees, I try to once a week tell them what I'm thankful for what they do. I walk into the office. The person sitting in front, I just, that person is always going to have the biggest smile. And I always tell them, you make my day. I walk in and my day is made because this huge smile, but that's a great thing. That
uplifts everybody.
But you can find something good to say about people, that when those questions come, the field is somewhat leveled. to where they respect that you will have their best interests at heart. Some people, though, will be wanting to get you and wanting to pick a fight. And in those situations, which is okay, it's okay. You know what? We always hear that God, when you want to go to war with God, He says, okay.
Yeah.
He wants you
Yeah.
to. So
Yeah.
that goes for other people as well. They may be that additional anxiety and angst and stuff that that needs to be worked through. And so if you're able to ask them questions that allows you to kind of reset, to give yourself time to think, again, I think we need to trust God's provision that He will give us the answers we need that are right for that person.
Yeah, you mentioned people matter to God, and you got to help someone get to a better place. You also mentioned a book called Boys in the Boat.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, so not the movie. The movie was okay. The book is outstanding. The book is really 3 parts. There's really 3 books in it, and I think that is a microcosm of what's going on in America now. There's so much antagonism. There's so much upheaval, a lot of change. Well, if you think about that story is about this group of boys who came together to row a boat, and they won the Olympic gold medal in Berlin.
Right.
It's a story about Nazi Germany, about what was happening in Nazi Germany, and it was a story about the Depression and what was happening in America. So 3 different stories in one, but what's amazing is it's a lot like what's happening today.
Yeah.
And so we can see through history. Like you said, there's nothing new under the sun. It happens over and over again. And if we can kind of step back and say, this happened before. God took care of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen again.
Yep.
God's going to take care of us. But what's my job?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I stand? How do I fit into this? And how can I help people make a greater impact in life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that,
I love that. And I think too, my husband and I had been talking about how, especially after 2020, I think a lot of us felt, very separated, and you feel like you're getting negative because you're not seeing a lot of people. And that's when we started to really dig into our Bibles more. I mean, if you do a Bible study every day, the more you read God's word and you see and feel His love for you, the happier you're going to be. It's not going to happen overnight. I think they've done some statistics on it too, saying that, if you read your Bible once a week, doesn't make much difference. Read it twice a week, not much different. 3 times, a little bit. But if you read it 4 or more, it's amazing how much God starts to worm His way into, or rather you are now allowing, because you're really having a conversation with God all the time. And I think that helps when you are out and about amongst the world with people that are angry, people that are having issues. It will remind you of what you may have just read. Have you ever found that where you've read something and
I'm the vine, you're the branches. Absent me, you can do nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's, you stay connected and it happens. I remember Tim Smith and I did, we had a Bible study we were in. There's several guys, but Tim and I were the closest ones, and we went through experiencing God. And what I remember from that was not only just the rich time that we had together studying, but it really helped us think through how we do church.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we come to church, or we come to a service or to something looking for, what can I get out of it?
Yeah.
Well, that taught us to think about, go to church and find someone who needs something and help them. Mm-hmm. And so again, it kind of went back to this DNA. It really connected with me that there are ways to go through life, as opposed to everything being about me and what can I get, but what can I give? Right.
And I that actually is a really good way to kind of end this, because the question is, how can God fix what's wrong in the world? He fixes us with each one of us in whatever spot that we're in. You have to make the decision of how you're going to behave, how you're going to respond to other people. I think I told you a little bit about my father-in-law. had an 8th grade education, great man. But when he was ill and not doing well, the checkout counter lady knew him, wanted to come and take care of him. The hairdresser came over and did his hair, shaved him. I mean, all these people he made an impact on. He always had to go to the store. He knew everybody. And so we think that we don't have an impact, but we really do. And that's how God can change this world, through each one of us, one at a time.
We don't have the impact. He has the impact.
Well,
he just uses us.
You're exactly right. I misspoke. You are correct. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching and viewing. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to ask, just send me an email at online@firstcolonychurch.org. And please share this with someone who you think might be inspired by it. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.